The call was 4 minutes long. 4 minutes! And then she was standing in her kitchen with a coffee that had gone lukewarm and a case file open on the counter and no idea what to do with either of them. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. My name isn't important. What I do is, I work in family services. I've been doing it for 6 years. I am the person who sits across from families in crisis and helps them figure out what they cannot figure out alone. I help people navigate systems that are designed sometimes to be navigated against them. I find things that aren't being said. That is my literal job. I am paid to notice what people are not telling me. I have a brother. I have spent the last 3 years telling anyone who would listen that my brother is a good person who made bad choices. Property crime, I said. Nonviolent. He made bad choices and now he is paying for them, and when he gets out, I am going to be there. That is what I said. The parole officer's call came in on a Wednesday, middle of the afternoon. I had a case file on the counter, a family, 2 parents mid-separation, 2 kids being used as leverage in the way kids sometimes are. And I had my handwriting in the margins because I had been reading it before my lunch and then kept reading after. The phone rang. I saw it was a number I didn't know and answered the way I answer numbers I don't know when I'm in work mode, which is efficiently, ready to be useful. It was a parole officer, confirming a supervision appointment for my brother. Routine call. I have received these calls before. He calls me sometimes when he can't reach my brother's other contacts. I am listed. I have made myself available. I said yes, I'll pass along the time. And then he said something, a phrase, a legal designation. He said it in the middle of a sentence about conditions of supervision, matter of fact, the way you say things that are to you completely normal. The phrase related to a charge category, not the charge I had been told about for 3 years. I said, I'm sorry, can you clarify what you mean by that? He clarified. His voice was patient and slightly confused, not suspicious, just the confusion of someone who has assumed the person on the other end of the phone already knows something. He had no reason not to assume I knew. He was confirming an appointment. He was not delivering news. He had no idea he was delivering anything. I said, of course, thank you for the clarification. I'll make sure he knows about the appointment. And I ended the call. Then I stood in my kitchen without moving. I have this thing I do when I am processing something difficult. I count. It started when I was a kid. I used to count ceiling tiles when something was wrong, when I was anxious or scared or couldn't locate the feeling I was having. The count gave me something to do with my brain while the rest of me caught up. I don't always do it consciously. I notice it when I'm already doing it. I was counting conversations. The ones I'd had over 3 years, with colleagues, with friends, with people at my mother's table, with my brother's friends who came to me sometimes, needing reassurance, needing to know he was going to be okay. 11 of those conversations. 11 times I had said, property crime, nonviolent, he made bad choices. 11 times the people I was talking to had looked at me with an expression I had read as sympathy or complicated agreement or the particular tiredness of people who are carrying their own things. 11 times. I got to 11 and stopped counting. My family knew, all of them. My mother, my aunts, my cousin Deanna, who I have talked to on the phone once a week for 3 years. My brother's closest friends who came to the courthouse and sat behind him at the hearings. Every single person who had ever looked me in the eye while I said what I believed about my brother. They all knew. I was the only one who didn't. 3 years earlier. I want to tell you what it was like 3 years earlier, so you understand what I am talking about when I talk about what I lost. My brother is 2 years older than me. We grew up in a house where both our parents worked, and we were left alone together enough to become fluent in each other. He taught me things, how to ride a bike, which I already knew, but he insisted on reteaching me in his way, the proper way. How to read the back of a card hand before you play it. How to get off a bus 3 stops early and walk the rest of the way, because sometimes you need the extra time to think. He is patient. He is funny in a quiet way, not the kind of funny that performs itself, the kind that slips in sideways. He wins things graciously. That is rarer than it sounds. There is a card game our grandmother taught him when he was maybe 10, a complicated thing with specific rules that take a long time to explain and that do not make complete sense until you have played them for several hours. She taught him and he taught me, and we have played it our whole lives. I have tried to teach it to 3 different people, my college roommate, a boyfriend, a friend from work, and failed every time. Not because the game is that hard, because the game is the kind of thing you have to have learned young, have to have put into your hands before your hands knew what they were holding. My roommate got frustrated. The boyfriend thought he understood it and didn't. My work friend gave up after 40 minutes and said it seemed like something you'd have to grow up with. She wasn't wrong. My brother and I played this game through prison visiting room glass for 3 years. We developed a system, holding cards up to show each other, pointing, a shorthand of gestures and expressions for the game's specific decisions. We tried to get the 3rd table from the left, near the window that faces the car park, every visit. We usually got it. When we didn't, when some other family had it, we settled for the 2nd one over, and it was slightly worse because the light was different, and it affected how you could read the other person's cards in the reflection. 36 visits. I logged them. I know the exact number because I kept a small record, not formal, just dates and notes, because it felt important to have something other than memory as evidence of showing up. He won most of the games. He is better at it than I am. He always has been. And he was never, not once, anything other than gracious about it. He would put the cards down and sort of tilt his head, like he was mildly surprised the outcome had gone his way, like it could easily have been different. Maybe it felt that way to him. Maybe that was just who he is. On visit 36, 6 months before the phone call, I drove out to the facility on a Saturday morning. The drive takes 40 minutes, and I always listen to the same playlist I made for these drives, music that is just interesting enough to hold my attention without making me feel anything too much. I signed in. I went through the standard procedure. I found the 3rd table, near the window. He looked the same as he always looked. He ages the same way my father did, slowly, without drama. We played cards. He told me about a correspondence course he was taking. I told him about the separation case, without names, without identifying details, just the shape of it. He asked good questions. He always asks good questions. He says, "You care so much. You really care so much about these families. It's important work." And I believe him when he says it, because he is my brother, and I know when he is sincere. He won 2 hands out of 3. He tilted his head. I drove home on the same playlist. I remember thinking, on that drive home, at least this is still intact. Whatever else is hard about this, the visits, the procedures, the way the year count had become a kind of weight I didn't put down. At least this part, the part between him and me, was real and was still mine. That is what I was thinking 6 months before the phone call. So, Wednesday afternoon, case file on the counter, lukewarm coffee, 11 conversations. I know how to look things up. It is part of my job. I am fast at it. I know which databases to use. I know how public records work and where they live. It took me 11 minutes from the end of the phone call to find what I was looking for. I have been asking myself since then why it took me 3 years to look. The answer I keep coming back to is, I wasn't looking. I was told something, and I believed it, and I stopped there because the person who told me was my mother, and the person the information was about was my brother. And I did not apply the same habits to my family that I applied to everything else. I don't know if that's normal. I think it might be normal. I don't know if it being normal makes it okay. What I found in 11 minutes of searching, a discrepancy. Legal language is imprecise. I know this. I work with it every week. Charge categories overlap. What a parole officer flags is not always what appears on the original conviction document. I told myself this. I told myself it carefully, walking through each part of the argument, making sure each step held. Then I read the document again. The step did not hold. I put my phone face down on the counter and went and stood by the kitchen window. The street outside was doing its ordinary afternoon thing. A woman with a dog, a delivery driver. The light was the specific kind of mid-afternoon light that falls differently in October than any other month. Flatter somehow, less interested in what it lands on. Okay, I thought. Okay. Think. The parole officer used a specific designation. That designation applies to a specific charge category. That charge category does not map onto what I was told 3 years ago. It maps onto something different. Something I would describe differently if I were filing paperwork on a case at work. There is an explanation, I told myself. I work in a social services office. Legal language is imprecise. I do not have the complete picture. Then I thought, I have never tried to get the complete picture. In 3 years, I have never tried to get the complete picture. I left the case file on the counter. I called my mother. My mother is a person who has never, in my experience, been caught off guard. She anticipates, she prepares. She enters every significant conversation having already considered how it might go and what the exits are. This is a quality I admire in her. I think I learned some version of it from watching her. But it means that when you're talking to her, you are always also talking to the version of the conversation she ran in her head first. I called her at 7 that evening. I had spent the afternoon at my desk reading the case file I was supposed to be reading none of it, going back to my phone, putting my phone down. I had called my brother's parole officer back and asked 2 careful questions that I framed as administrative clarifications, and received 2 answers that did not help me believe the explanation I had been trying to build. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. She said my name the way she always does, with the particular warmth she reserves for me, the one I have been hearing my whole life, and have taken completely for granted until approximately 7 that evening, when I stood in my kitchen and heard it and thought, she has been doing that, while she knew. I asked about the parole officer's call. I mentioned the appointment, the confirmation, the phrase. I said I had been confused by some of the language, and wanted to check that I had the right understanding of the conditions. My mother's answer was one beat too smooth. I know what a prepared answer sounds like. I know the rhythm of it, the way someone lands on their words when their words have been thought about beforehand. The tiny absence of searching, the slight fluency where there should be slight hesitation. She is good. She has always been good. But I am better at listening to this than almost anyone I have ever met, and I heard it. I said, "Mom, I looked it up." A silence, not long, but the specific kind of silence that is not the absence of something, it is the presence of a decision being made. She said, "I know." I said, "You knew the whole time." She said, "Yes." 2 words, not relieved when she said them, not guilty exactly, more like someone putting something down that has been heavy for a long time. That is the most accurate thing I can say about it. She said, "I know the way you say it when you have been waiting to say it, when the saying of it is, in some complicated way, a relief, even if what you are saying is not a relief to the person hearing it." We talked for another 20 minutes, the logistics of the conversation, who told her, when she knew, what the plea agreement had contained. Those came out in the 20 minutes. But the 20 minutes started with those 2 words, and every sentence after them was just filling in details I could already see the shape of. I ended the call. I stood in the kitchen for the 3rd time that day. It was 9:30. The coffee was long gone. My brother had not committed property crime without a victim. There was a person, a specific person. The charge I had been told about, the one I had described to 11 different people, was the result of a plea agreement, a reduction. I had a good day. I contributed something useful in a project meeting, and Patricia said, without looking up from her laptop, "Good point." And I went back to my desk feeling fine. That evening, on the 4 blocks between the office and the station, A woman was walking her dog ahead of me, one of those small, solid dogs that moves like it is very committed to being somewhere. And I was behind her and enjoying the brief comedy of the dog's momentum versus her leash management. And then I moved past her and looked up to navigate around a delivery cart on the sidewalk, and he was there. Different side of the street, same direction, green bag, carabiner. I did not look away. I crossed to the other side, wide angle, using the delivery cart as an excuse to shift, and then I was on the opposite sidewalk, and he was on his original side, and I walked to the subway entrance without looking back. I moved to the other side of the street, and then I had a whole conversation with myself on the way home about how that was a completely normal thing to do and meant nothing. I had that conversation a lot. That evening, I scrolled through the note from the beginning. I had not read it in sequence before, I had only added to it. Reading it from the top, I saw what I had not seen, adding one entry at a time. I saw the shape. 17 appearances out of 21 commute days. 2 absences on days I had deviated from my schedule. An evening presence, twice now, on the commercial block between my office and the station. As a list, the entries were meaningless. In sequence, with the gaps marked, they were a pattern I would flag immediately in any dataset I was paid to analyze. It is my job and my nature, and I have never, until 3 weeks ago, understood how exhausting that can be. After work, I drove to the courthouse. I want to say something about the courthouse building itself. I have been in it many times, for hearings, for records requests, for professional reasons. I know the smell of it, that specific institutional smell that is part paper and part disinfectant, and part the particular staleness of air that has been recycled through government-grade HVAC for several decades. I know the sound of it, the way conversations echo slightly in the main hall, the particular click of the security desk's computer. I am not afraid of this building. It is a neutral space to me. It is a place where things are documented. I requested the full case file for my brother's case. I sat in a small room with a photocopied stack of documents, and I read them. The original charge first, then the plea agreement, then the supporting documents, then the victim impact statement. I've read hundreds of victim impact statements in my career. They are part of the work. I help people write them sometimes, sit across from someone who has had something taken from them, and help them find language for what that cost. I know how to read them professionally. I know the structure, the form requirements, how the language gets shaped by the process. I read this one the same way I read them at work, all the way through, twice. Someone wrote it, a specific person. It described what happened and what it cost, and it named the cost in specific terms, and the terms were true. I could feel that they were true, in the way you can feel when someone is describing something that actually happened to them. There is a texture to that kind of testimony. It does not read like something assembled. It reads like something endured. I put it face down on the table. The fluorescent lights in that room made a sound I had not noticed when I came in. I did not go back to the courthouse that evening. I drove to my mother's house. She was in the kitchen. The kitchen smells like everything her kitchen has always smelled like. Garlic and the specific fabric softener she has used my whole life, and something underlying it all that is just hers. Just the smell of that kitchen, something I have no other name for. She was making dinner. She turned when I came in. I have a key to my mother's house. I have always had a key. She gave me one when I moved out at 18 and said, "This is always your house." I have used the key for 29 years without thinking about what it meant that she gave it to me. Last night I thought about it on the drive over. I thought about it again when I put the key in the lock. I sat down at the table where every significant conversation in our family has happened. The chair she always sits in, the one that has been hers since before I can remember, the one slightly set back from the others, slightly angled toward the room. She came and sat in it. I said, "Tell me who else knew." She put down what she was holding. She sat down. She listed them. My mother, my Aunt Patricia, my Aunt Rose, my cousin Deanna, who calls me once a week, 3 of my brother's friends, his attorney, obviously. I said, "Was there a conversation? Did you all agree?" She said it wasn't exactly like that. It happened more gradually. My brother had told her, she had told my aunts, and then there was a general understanding, and then the hearings happened, and everyone maintained the understanding. I said, a general understanding that I should be lied to? She said, we didn't lie to you. I said, you told me it was property crime. She said, it was in the charge was property. I said, Mom. She looked at her hands. I said, Deanna calls me every week. She called me last Tuesday. I told her I was looking forward to Marcus getting out in 8 months. I told her I was planning something for when he gets out. A dinner. I was telling her about a dinner I was planning. She said it sounded great. She asked what restaurant. My mother did not say anything. I said, what did you think was going to happen? When he got out? When we were all at the same table? What was the plan? She said, I thought he would tell you himself. He said he was going to tell you himself. I said, before or after the dinner? She said my name. I said, you thought I would take it harder. That's what you said last night. You thought I would take it harder than the rest of you. She said yes. I said, you thought caring meant I couldn't know the truth. She didn't answer. Not because she had nothing to say, because there was no version of an answer that worked and she knew it. The kitchen smelled the same as it always smells. That is the thing I kept noticing. Everything looked the same and smelled the same, and the chair she always sits in was the chair she always sits in. Nothing in that kitchen had changed except my understanding of every conversation I had ever had in it. I counted 11. I had counted 11 conversations. But sitting at that table, I started counting differently. Not just the conversations with people outside my family, but the ones inside it. The Sunday dinners where my mother asked how Marcus seemed to me, whether he seemed okay, whether I thought the visits were helping. The phone calls with Deanna where she asked how I was holding up, and I said I was holding up fine. It was hard, but I was managing. I was good at managing. The time my Aunt Rose sat across from me at a family gathering and said she didn't know how I did it, showed up like that every month. She said she admired me. She admired me. She knew. She sat across from me and said she admired me. I sat at my mother's table and I did not fall apart. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. I am 37 days out from the phone call and I have not fallen apart. I have been managing it. Carefully, in the way I manage things. But I am telling you, the cost of managing things is that they are still there when you set them down. There is a parking lot outside the courthouse. I ended up there later that week on a Thursday evening. Not for any specific reason. I had come back to the courthouse for a records follow-up, administrative, and then it was 9 at night and I was sitting in my car in the parking lot and the building was still lit up inside. That light. The institutional yellow of a building that runs on electricity that doesn't come from anyone's choice, that just runs. The courthouse was going to be lit up on Thursday evening whether I was in the parking lot or not. It was going to be lit up on Friday and Saturday and the next week and the week after that. The documents I read were going to stay in that file room whether I came back or not. I was thinking about the victim impact statement. I have helped people write those statements. I have sat across from people in the worst periods of their lives and helped them put into language what happened to them and what it cost. I believe in that work. I believe in the capacity of documented testimony to do something real, to make a reality visible that would otherwise be invisible or minimized or smoothed over by other people's more convenient versions. That is what I believe. That is what I go to work believing every day. For 3 years, I have been, in various conversations, contributing to a more convenient version. I know I did not know. Not knowing is real. It is not a fiction I am constructing for myself. The information was withheld from me. I could not have known what I had not been told. But I contributed. I used his situation as professional evidence. Not with names, not with identifying details, but more than once, I sat across from a colleague and said something like, "My own brother is in the system, and he is not a violent person. He made bad choices. Circumstances shape choices. The charge is not the person." I said that. in a professional context, based on incomplete information that everyone around me knew was incomplete. And someone, the person who wrote that statement, who sat down and described what happened to them and submitted it to a legal process, that person's reality existed the entire time I was saying those things. Their cost was real the entire time. I was not erasing it intentionally. I was not erasing it at all in my own mind. But I was part of a pattern of being given a version of events and using that version. And the pattern has a victim. And I knew the victim's existence was real because I read their words. I stayed in the parking lot until the lights in the courthouse went off. That was the thing that made me start the car. Not a decision, just the dark. Then I drove home. I want to talk about who I thought I was. This is the part I have not been able to talk to anyone about, because it requires saying something that sounds either melodramatic or self-pitying, and it is neither. Or I am trying to make it neither. But you're not someone I know, and I can't tell anyone I know. So, I have spent my career being good at something specific. I don't accept the version I'm given. When a family comes to me in crisis, there is always a version on offer. A parent's version, a child's account, an institution's documentation. And my job is to hold all the versions at once without collapsing into any one of them, and to find the thing in the space between them that is actually true. I am good at this. My supervisor has told me I am good at this. My colleagues come to me when they can't find the thread. I have found threads that were very well hidden. I did not look for the thread in my own family. I took the version I was given. I took it because the person giving it was my mother, and because the subject was my brother, and because I was already doing something hard, visiting, showing up, maintaining the relationship through glass and bad lighting and institutional smells, and the version I had was the version that made the hard thing possible. If I had known the truth, visiting would have been more complicated. If I had known the truth, the card game and the gracious losing and the clean-feeling drive home would have been different. Maybe I didn't want to know. I have been sitting with that. I don't think it's entirely true. I think if anyone had told me, I would have found a way to continue. I am someone who has a high tolerance for complicated truths. I do not need things to be simple. I have never needed my brother to be a simple person. But I have needed him to be the person I was told he was. And those two things are not the same, and I think I was confusing them. And then there is the professional thing, the thing that lives underneath the personal thing and is harder to put down. I have built my understanding of how systems work around the idea that the person in the system is not always who the charge says they are. That the charge is a reduction, that it does not contain the full human reality. I have said this so many times it has become something I believe in my body, not just my mind. I have been right about it most of the time. In most cases, the person in the system is more complicated than the documentation. My brother is more complicated than the documentation. He is also more accurately represented by it than I knew. Both of these things are true. I am trying to hold both. The thing I cannot move past is the question of why I didn't look. Not the people who misled me. I can understand them, I can be angry at them, I can hold them responsible and still understand the human logic that led them there. But myself, why did I not look? I look at everything else. I sat in a parking lot and held that question. I did not get an answer. I think the answer might take a while. I think the answer might be what therapy is for. 2 weeks after the courthouse, so 3 weeks after the phone call, my brother called. He calls once a month, a scheduled call from the facility. I have answered every one of them for 3 years. When this one came in, I sat with the phone in my hand for the 4 rings before I picked up. I almost didn't. I picked up. He knew something had changed. I could tell he knew because of the way he was careful. There is a texture to a careful conversation, a slight front-loading of small, safe things, a slightly longer than normal pause before the subjects that might be difficult. I know his voice. 36 visits and 3 years of calls. I know his voice the way you know the voice of someone who has been part of your specific sound landscape your entire life. He said, "Mom told me you found out." I said, "Yes." He said, I wanted to tell you myself. I was going to tell you when I got out. When I could tell you properly, face to face, not through glass. I said, don't tell me what you thought. A silence. Not hostile, just the silence of someone accepting the correction. He said, I'm sorry. I said, I know. And then neither of us said anything. That sounds like it would be unbearable, that silence, but it wasn't. It was the kind of silence that has always existed between us, the one we've always been able to sit in without needing to fill it. I sat in it and felt the weight of everything it was carrying now, and also, underneath that, the specific grief of it, that the silence was still ours, that he was still my brother across the gap of it. I don't know what to do with that. The call ended the way our calls always end. Logistics, dates, a goodbye. He said, I love you. He says that at the end of every call. I said it back, and I meant it, and I have no idea what that means, or whether meaning it makes anything better, or worse, or simply true. He was managing something during that call. I could hear it, the management, something careful in how he held himself together across the phone. I know what it costs, that kind of holding. I am doing it myself. I am not ready to care about what it costs him. I think I will be, eventually. I am not yet. There is a deck of cards on my bookshelf. I keep it there because years ago, I decided I was going to practice the game on my own, in the evenings, just running through the hands to get better. I never actually did it. The cards sat there as an intention I kept meaning to act on, and never did. Because you cannot really play the game alone. It requires two hands playing against each other, and the whole point of the game is reading the other player, the way they hold their cards, the tells they develop and try to hide, and eventually stop hiding because you know each other too well. A few days after the courthouse, I came home from work and the deck was just there, on the shelf, visible from across the room. I stood in front of it for a while. I didn't touch it. I walked past it and made dinner, and watched something on my laptop and eventually went to bed. In the morning it was still there, obviously, because a deck of cards does not move on its own. I have been walking past it every day. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if we play again, at the third table near the window, with our system, with the shorthand we developed over 36 visits. I don't know if I go back. I don't know what I want from a conversation I'm not ready to have. I know he wins graciously. I have always known that. I know it means something that he does. I am trying to figure out what it means now. Here is what I have established in the last 3 weeks, in the way I establish things for cases at work. Document by document, source by source. Things I know are true, as opposed to things I have been told. My brother committed a crime with a specific victim. The victim's family accepted a plea deal. The reduced charge was property crime, and it was, technically, accurate. There was a property component. Everyone involved in the legal proceedings knew what was behind the reduction. Every member of my family who attended the proceedings knew. My family decided, collectively, not to tell me. My brother knew they had not told me. He knew for 3 years. He says he was going to tell me himself. I cannot assess whether this is true. 11 conversations. 11 times I said what I believed to people who knew what I believed was incomplete. Those conversations happened. I cannot unhappen them. The people I had them with, some of them colleagues, some of them friends, who have now also spent 3 years with the property crime version, I do not know yet what I do about that. The victim impact statement is a public document. It will remain a public document. The person who wrote it will continue to exist outside this story with what happened to them. I cannot do anything with that except hold it and understand what I was a small, unintentional part of, even without knowing. My mother called me yesterday. She didn't say much. She said she was thinking about me and she hoped I was okay. I said I was working on it. She said, I know I should have told you. I said, yes. She said she was sorry. I said I heard her, and I would call her back when I was ready. She said she understood, and she loved me, and she would be here. I don't know when I call her back. I don't know what I say. I know she loves me. I know she made a decision that assumed I needed to be managed rather than trusted. Both of these things are true at the same time, and I am still figuring out how to hold them together. My aunts have not called. Deanna has not called. I think they are waiting for a cue about what I need, and I think the cue is not coming yet, because I don't know yet what I need. I could not sleep for most of the second week. I am sleeping now, not well, but functionally, enough to get to work and do the work correctly. I have not told anyone at work. My supervisor asked if I was okay on the third day because I am apparently less opaque than I think I am, and I said I had a family situation I was working through. She said, "Let me know if you need anything." I said I would. I will not, probably, but it was kind of her to say. I have a friend, her name is Jo. She has been my friend since university. She has heard the property crime version more times than I can count. She is someone I call when things are wrong. I have not called her. I pick up my phone and I open her name and I think, Jo knows the version. The version is how she understands my brother. If I tell Jo the truth, I am not only telling her about Marcus, I am also telling her that the story she has been told for 3 years was wrong, and the person who was telling it was me. That is a different kind of conversation, and I do not know how to begin it. I am aware that this is isolating. I am aware that I am handling something too big for one person to handle alone by keeping it to one person, who is me. I am aware of this the way I am aware of a lot of things right now. Intellectually, from a slight distance, watching myself do the thing I know is not optimal. I have been thinking about therapy for 2 years. Not in an urgent way, in the way you think about things you know you should do and keep not doing because they are not yet on fire. The last 3 weeks have been on fire. A colleague, not on my team, someone I know less well, enough that there is useful distance there, mentioned her therapist to me about a year ago, gave me the name without pushing it. I kept the name in my phone under a contact I had labeled with the woman's name, Dr. Fenwick, and her number. I looked at it a few times and didn't call. Last Friday, I called. She had an opening on Tuesday. I took it. The waiting room is gray. Not depressingly gray, just the particular gray of furniture that is chosen to be unobtrusive and comfortable and does not commit to anything. There is a plant in the corner that is obviously well cared for. Someone waters it, trims it, thinks about whether it is getting enough light. There is a low table with magazines that I am not going to pick up. There is a window that looks out onto a narrow alley between buildings, and beyond that, a slice of street. I have been sitting here for 7 minutes. My appointment is at 2. It is 1:53. I have the deck of cards in my bag. I don't know why I brought it. I was packing my bag this morning and the deck was on the shelf, and I picked it up and put it in my bag without deciding to. It's there now, underneath my wallet and my work badge and the case file I brought home last night to read on the bus. I don't have an ending for this yet. That's the honest answer. I have 37 days of new information and a parking lot and a phone call I am not ready to think about without my chest doing something complicated. And I have a mother who loves me and made a decision about my reality without me. And I have a brother across a pane of glass who wins things graciously and will tell me, one day, in whatever language he can find, what he wants me to understand about what happened. I don't know if I will be ready to listen. I think I will eventually be ready. I think eventually is not now. I think about the person who wrote that statement. I think about them a lot. Not in a way where I can do something useful with the thinking. There is no useful action available to me. The process has run its course. The sentence is being served. I just think about them the way you think about someone whose reality you now know about and cannot unknow. I hold it. I do not know yet what to do with the holding except to keep doing it and see what it turns into. I am good at my job. I still believe I am good at my job. I believe I can be good at it and also have been wrong, simultaneously. And that understanding how I was wrong might make me better rather than worse at the thing I have spent my career doing. I am telling myself this. Some days I believe it more than others. Today, in this waiting room, I believe it about 60%. That feels like progress from the first week when I believed it about 15%. I have the card game in my bag. I have not taken it out. I'm thinking about the third table from the left, near the window that faces the car park. I'm thinking about the drive, 40 minutes, the playlist. I'm thinking about what it means that when I imagined going back, and I have imagined it in the last 3 weeks more than I expected to, the thing I imagined was the specific sound of the visiting room, the specific quality of his voice across the glass, the way he tilts his head when he wins. I don't know what that means. I know it means something. My name will be called in a few minutes. I will go in and sit down, and a person who does not know my family and has no stake in which version of this I tell will look at me and say, "So, what brings you in today?" And I will start talking.